As you can see, breaking news is NASA officially announced that January 2024 is the date for a terrifying and thrilling return to the moon 50 years after the last Apollo mission. Because we totally made it to the moon the first go around, right? I can take you down that rabbit hole if you do please, and I will make everything that I'm about to talk about fully plausible. But so many seem to be unaware that way before any of us existed in this lifetime, we did make it out to space, but space is not actually what they would like to seem appealing. And you can no longer present that credible proof here on TikTok because it's labeled as misinformation. It's pretty intriguing. It's also pretty intriguing that we rely on NASA to paint an image of truth for us. It is also intriguing because we're in the age of becoming consciously aware, and that's becoming consciously aware of the veil that they have placed in front of us to create this facade of lies to deceive us for so long. And none of us feel as if we're capable of breaking out of that barrier in our reality because it just doesn't seem realistic. You rather be spoon-fed and not actually research into matters for yourself. You don't actually become enlightened because you're relying on somebody else's opinion, which is ironic because science in itself is just a huge theory. And our perspectives have simply been changed because of the control of certain frequencies around us. Frequencies of which I am speaking on right now. And I could give a fuck less, honestly. I have a pretty secure network to the point of where I won't actually be intruded by those outside forces. Plus the fact that I am off grid, so that happens to help a lot. Which is another thing, like everybody relies on the central government for everything. Every single necessity in society that you would actually consider a necessity, you have to rely on them to receive. How many people are actually self-sustainable? How many people have a green thumb and have their own gardens, have their own herbs, natural ways of healing? You know, the ways that were stolen from the original indigenous that used to live in the United States? It's also intriguing because, you know, the individuals that actually own NASA, and I mean literally own NASA, right, are the individuals that own Disney, the individuals that own Pfizer. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on, and you'd be baffled as to what you can actually find if you actually research into important matters. Matters that you try to defend, but in reality, you have no defense to begin with because you have no proof in yourself. And your only proof is Google, which Google's ex-CEO still hasn't shown up to court from his subpoena that was issued to him for being a personal advisor to Jeffrey Epstein, Larry Page. So that's pretty intriguing that we look up to Google in itself to paint a truth for us, when in actuality, you have to dig very deep. And in reality, I'll share a little secret with you. If you actually want to receive the real truth behind the moon landing, right? I recommend taking a hike up to Mount Rushmore, going behind Abraham Lincoln's ear, bringing a laser cutter with you, and opening up the door that's behind his ear. I'm not gonna go too far into that. Anybody who would actually like to know what I'm speaking about, just DM me. Because this is now censor talk, which is very intriguing because they stated that they would never actually let the US have that kind of control. But here they are with the Oracle system. Mr. Larry Ellison. Oh man, if people only knew who Larry Ellison and himself was, oh God, their minds would be so open. But since I've gotten way off topic, let's get back on the fact that it took 50 years to get back to the moon because we claim that we lost that technology, even though we can make probes that go right into the sun's atmosphere. And I'm sure so many patriotic Americans in themselves are going to jump on this post and be like, oh, really? Well, science is this and science is that. And I have proof that we made it to the moon because they said so. Humans are actually hilarious. You know, over 10,000 years ago, they completely neglected same-sex marriage, but the Pope just stated that he's fully open for it. So, I mean, let's really question who we look up to as an idol. Because God, reversing that narrative after I don't know how many hangings and executions. Oof. But see, nobody actually likes to question anything nowadays because they feel comfortable in this little confined infrastructural society that their mommy and their daddies were forced to build in their favor. One of which most of us can't actually succeed within because we are literally unable to even get a start to begin with. And I'm just gonna ask you to please look into the 2030 agenda. I'm gonna ask you to look in Saudi Arabia's The Line. I'm gonna ask you to look into smart cities. And I'm gonna ask you to finally look into the NORAM project. Then when you look into NORAM, look who they're associated with, specific energy companies, et cetera, et cetera. And then look at where those energy companies happen to be rebuilding right now. Because one of those projects actually exists in Maui. Another being implemented in Spokane, Washington. Another being implemented in Yellowknife, Canada. another being implemented into Kenona, Canada as well, another being implemented into Athens, another being implemented into Larissa. And you know what all these places have in common, and I still have about 15 to go? They all miraculously had the worst fire season ever. But that controversy aside, which is pretty evident at this point. I mean, I've proven it on numerous occasions months ago. And it's interesting because we just allow ourselves to be trampled on, right? We allow this world to be burned. We allow this world to be taken away from us. The beauty that it withholds to be taken away from us. We rely on pharmaceutical companies to cure all our problems, all of our supposed diseases that we've only accumulated through certain ingredients that are in the food that we eat now. While none of us can actually comprehend the fact that we can live off the land, and a majority of plants and herbs around the world can actually benefit our health in so many different manners that we'd feel like a completely different person if we were actually going to partake in those methods. And it's highly ironic as well, because if you look into the last year and a half of how many plants and herbs that were moved to specific locations that happen to actually be turning into a gigantic development of a city. And that city is called the Neon Project. And Saudi Arabia's line is just a small smidge of what this city is going to be. You'll be able to see this thing from space. While the land around us in the world just so happens to miraculously be burned, and all the plants and herbs of which we can actually rely on to help benefit us in those times just so happen to be gone, diminished, erased, taken. Kind of like the artifacts that Napoleon himself took from Egypt after he invaded them. You know, it's actually pretty interesting because that movie in itself just shows how much of a facade our reality is and how much of a veil that they've actually been able to create, right? I mean, the Napoleon movie was completely false. That man never shot at the pyramids. Are you serious? They like to mislead you. They like to defer you away. And then we give into an entertainment industry that does nothing for us but profit off of us. Only with NASA being at the very head of that entertainment industry. Stars, planets. God, if people only knew the origins of humanity. But hey, who's excited for the next moon landing, right?